Still here, that's all me. Black love 2D.
Hello and welcome everyone. We are super excited to be kicking off our Building Beyond Row Organizing Summit tonight. Wow, I'm just super excited. So I'm going to be doing our little welcome. I'm Olivia Samples. I'm the event coordinator for this summit. So I've had the joy of putting this together, talking with all of our amazing speakers. And I'm also a resource. If you need anything during this time, just let me know. You can contact me via email at buildingbeyondrow@amplify-ga.org. I'll put it in the chat as well. So some housekeeping things I wanted y'all to know is some tools that we have available to you. So we have the Ask a Question feature down at the bottom. So if you have a question that you want our speaker to answer, you can go ahead and pop it there. You can also upvote questions that you definitely want our speaker to answer. We also have a poll, so you can look out for polls within your session. And then we have our chat. So if you want to throw in who you are, where you're coming from, we'd love to hear it. And I'll also put some helpful links in the chat too. We have our community safety guidelines, which I will pop up right now. And these are just to keep everyone safe in the space. You can check them out if you'd like to, but our moderators will be in each session upholding these guidelines. There you go. And this is also being recorded, so just keep that in mind when you are on stage, or if you have anything to add to the chat, that will also be recorded. And replays will be available after the event, so you can catch any sessions that you missed or rewatch anything that was awesome. The schedule is located at the top left of your screen, and you can also access it with this link that I will add to our call to action here. If you have any questions about the schedule, again, feel free to email me. And then I also wanted to share gratitude for some awesome people who helped make this event happen. Let me add in our schedule before, so I can give them their props. There we go. So yeah, I wanted to shout out our Amplify's member org. So of course, ARC, Feminist Women's Health Center, NAPAWF, the New Georgia Project, Sister Song, Spark, Urge. We are so grateful for their partnership and their support in making this conference happen. Also, Faith in Public Life and Heart for turning out 10 folks each for this summit. We really appreciate your support as well. Thanks to everyone who filled out our supporter survey. So lots of people gave us input on what they wanted to see at this event, and we really appreciate that. And also the folks who did one-on-ones with me. So some folks gave me some more in-depth information, and I really appreciate y'all's time. And then lastly, our steering committee. So shout out to all those folks who gave us the ideas and the support to make this happen from the start. So with that, I'm going to let us get started and mute myself. So I'm going to pass it off to Gina.
Actually, I'm going to kick us off. Welcome, everyone. We are so excited to have you here. You have been invited because you are a community activist, an organizer, a leader in your community that wants to deepen the work that you do in reproductive justice-based movement for abortion access. Tomorrow is really going to be focused on building skills and taking actions, but we really wanted to take this time tonight to get grounded and to do some political education. So that's just the really short of it because we want to be able to get into it. I'm going to send it over to Rula, who is going to share a bit about this grounding event, and then we'll introduce Gina and get into it. And since I didn't introduce myself, my name is Allison Kaufman, and I'm the executive director of Amplify Georgia. All right, Rula, take it away.
Thank you, Allison. Hi, everybody. My name is Rula. I am State Campaigns Director at Amplify Georgia. Super excited, and I don't want to hold us back from too much more of the program. So without further ado, we're going to get into it. But what are we getting into? Our summit is beginning with this ritual of grounding. So we really wanted people to be here, whether you are craving this or were tempted to opt out. This act is actually essential to our being together for the rest of the summit. So we are really glad you're here. This is for everybody who wants to be in this movement, for healing justice practitioners, for skeptics, and everyone in between, because all of us need to connect with our own body and to move through the many emotions that influence our actions in times of loss, challenges, or even grief. And as a home for proactive, vision-forward collaboration, the Amplify community needs to start with this collective check-in, grounding ourselves in the why of our work so that we can be with ourselves and with each other in healthy and healing ways as we take action. We talked about this a lot because we know that it's possible to keep moving from a sense of urgency, anger, maybe just not knowing what else to do, or fear that if we stop, we won't start again. But we needed to do something different from that because we're going to be in this for the long haul, and that's what we're here for. Allison, back to you.
Yeah, and to lead us in this grounding work, we are joined today by the wonderful Gina Breedlove, who I had the pleasure of working with a couple of weeks ago in another space. Gina Breedlove is a sound healer, grief doula, musician, writer, and an oracle for grace. She began her work with spirit and sound when she was a little girl growing up in Brooklyn, New York. Gina travels the world with her medicines, guiding folks through rituals and sounding into the body using the power of their own voice for personal sovereignty, wellness, soul, and retrieval. Thank you so much, Griva. Thank you so much, Gina. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Allison. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, it's I've been having a little bit of technical challenges, so I'm so happy to be here with you all, and I invite you all into a space of listening. So understanding that there are various and myriad things happening. Oh my goodness, life is lifing. And so as much as you can and as much as you have capacity for, I invite you to lean into the sound of my voice. You're going to hear my voice. You're going to hear my sound bowl. And I'm going to guide us into meditation. So again, as you have capacity, because I know some folk may be driving and tuning in on their phones or, wherever you be in this moment, be in this meditation as much as you can, because even 5 minutes of deep breath, a deep collective breath, is of such deep service to the body. So with that, I will ask you, please, if you are able, to soften or close your eyes. It helps to be able to focus on the sound. And if you don't feel like closing your eyes today, I invite you to take your eyes off the screen. Rest them somewhere, maybe on beauty, in your home, something that you've given yourself. If you're a person that likes crystals like me or rocks, or if you have an altar in every room like I do, just rest your eyes elsewhere. Take them off the screen, please, and lean into the sound of my voice. Inhaling and exhaling at your own pace, because your body does know how to breathe. Deeply through your nose, and then exhale through your mouth. Create some space between your tongue and the roof of your mouth. This will relax your jaw. Inhaling and exhaling, cycle that breath. Inhaling through your nose. Hold a bit at the top if you can, and then exhale through your mouth. And breathe. Mindful breathing is turning your awareness toward it. So consider your breath. And now we are in shared agreement because we are all thinking about our breath. Inhaling, holding a bit at the top, and then exhaling through your mouth. Inhaling and exhaling. If the mind does what the mind will do and guides you out of the room, you turn toward it You turn toward whatever thought is trying to forward or backward. And you say, I'm breathing right now. I'll be back. All the thoughts will wait. This is a collective pause. Inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your mouth. Inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your mouth. And cycle that breath, and listen. Bring your awareness to the back of your skull. There is one nerve that I want to focus on in that collection of nerves, the parasympathetic nervous system stemming from the back of the brain, wandering around the back body. This nerve is called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve directly corresponds with your flight, fight, flight, fight, flight, fight response, a place where we have been hovering in between for a good long time now, and the body is tired. So, this vagus nerve wanders around the body. Vagus is wandering. In Latin, the vagus means to wander. And this nerve touches the back of your heart, your liver, your lungs, touches every organ in the body except the spleen. And a deep breath will calm the vagus nerve. As we move through the constancy of the unimaginable, we need deeper practices to calm the body. A deep breath, drawing your awareness to the back of your skull and your spine, vertebra by vertebra by vertebra, descending down the back body, moving inexorably toward your sacrum. And breathing will calm the body, will calm the vagus nerve, will tell your body that you are safe so that you can remember a plan, a comrade, community, and the reasons why we do what we do. It's hard to remember anything when we're afraid. So breathe with me. Let us breathe together. Inhaling, exhaling, inhaling, exhaling, and imagine this one nerve moving down your back body like a root descending from the back of your brain, touching the back of your beating heart, touching your liver on the right side of your body, your beating heart on the left, touching your kidneys that anchor alongside your spine, moving to the base, the root of you. In yogic science, the chakra body, the energy centers of the body. Follow that root down your back body as you inhale and exhale and take in the physical presence of you, the weight of you, the space you occupy, which belongs to you, down to the backs of thighs and knees and calves, the soles of your feet, wherever you be. And keep breathing with awareness and mindfulness, inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your mouth. Find your way up the front body until you get to your perineum. In yogic science, that is the root chakra, where bottom meets cushion, chair, earth, soil. The root of you, your perineum, and breathe into that place. Let us do that together now. The pelvic floor. Inhaling through your nose, holding a bit at the top, and then exhaling. And consider that sacred area of the body that also belongs to you. Inhaling and exhaling at the root. Vision with me now. Water. Choose a body of water. Maybe you're at the ocean. Maybe you're by the river. Let it be a calm and consistent flow. If you're at the ocean, let it be an easy current. But consider the flow of water, unimpeded, and breathe into your perineum. And just imagine being at this place, your place, a place to visit, to ground, to calm, to root. We need these places, and sometimes they have to be in the imaginal, because we are in back-to-back things. And sometimes all that we can reach for is a moment of closing our eyes and breathing and imagining. And this will calm the body. No matter what is going on around you, you have that power. You have the capacity. It is daily practice, but it is within our reach, because we also own our mind. Inhaling and exhaling, and be by the water's edge. And imagine that this route that you have followed, this root vein from your brain moving down the body. Imagine roots descending from the perineum. Imagine that. Wherever you all be, we are joined in this moment, in the energetic, in the invisible, because we are all on this call. Let us not doubt the power of that. And so, see your root by the water's edge, anchoring into the soft soil or the sand. Wherever you be, you will find me there, and you there, and you there, and you there, by thought, by visioning. Let us meet there together, overlapping roots, joined in shared agreement of freedom, agency, dominion, autonomy, ownership of your body, your word, and your mind. Inhale deeply through your nose, exhaling through your mouth, and if you are able, please give it some sound. And imagine, with your eyes closed or your eyes elsewhere, imagine the feeling of all the overlapping roots of comrades, of compas. What is the language that you use from your tradition, your tongue, your mother tongue? What feels good in your mouth? Notice and see and feel aligned in purpose, in knowing, in shared agreement of freedom. Inhaling and exhaling. Inhaling and exhaling. Inhaling and exhaling at your own pace. And we will be like a one root system of trees meeting each other there, communicating in that way. aligning. I got you. I got you. Side by side. I see you. I see you. And also in this place of overlapping roots, when there is grief, when there is fear, the earth will take it. I will witness you, and you witness me. But I encourage all of us, don't let it stay in the body. If it's caught in the throat or the back of the neck, if it's lurking somewhere in the body, a deep breath and some time of breathing and maybe humming, using the sound of your voice or speaking the word, however you speak a word, a prayer, a poem, your own personal heart sutra, whatever it is, to keep your body well, to keep us in knowing and memory of why we do what we do. For me, for you, for us, for my daughter, for my daughter's daughter. Sons, non-binary, trans, folk, all of us together. Gender non-conforming, the us, the they, the we, the them, of it all. In shared agreement of freedom. In shared agreement of freedom. Inhaling and exhaling, and allow your voice into the room. The power of your breath, the power of your sound, the power of a word, the power of yes, and the endless power of no. Not. Inhaling and exhaling at your own pace, family. And take in your body from the soles of your feet to the top of your head, your crown. Breathe. As we turn toward closing and sealing this moment we have opened between us, overlapping roots by the water's edge. Always, ever, only, ever, always. For freedom, for love, for dominion and sovereignty. For you and for me. Us. Inhaling and exhaling. And let us know it together. Your I am, whatever it be, at any given moment. Speaking it to yourself as a sacred reminder that we are all worthy of what we intend, of what we know. And so it is. Take good care. Dear Allison, I believe I pass it back to you.
Thank you so much, Gina. I don't know how that landed with everyone else, but that's exactly what I needed after a week of sprinting towards the summit. That was beautiful. Thank you so much.
My grace.
I'm going to take it slow because that was, I have all the feels across my entire body. You're getting a lot of love, Gina, in the chat from participants. All right, so we are going to slowly transition into the next part of our agenda tonight, where we are going to explore the reproductive justice framework. No reproductive freedom summit would be possible or sufficient without starting with the framework that has brought us all together, grounding us in reproductive justice. So we are being joined by 3 beautiful speakers who will be introducing us to the framework, talking about it in its intersectionalities, and really exploring what it means for this moment of doing our work here in Georgia after the fall of Roe. So I'm going to do a round of introductions as our speakers join us on this stage of sorts here in Crowdcast. Our first speaker, let me pull up my notes. Our first speaker is Akela Galloway. Akela is a lawyer who identifies as a Black feminist. Their advocacy focuses on the lived experiences, struggles, and needs of Black women, girls, and gender expansive folks of the diaspora. Receiving her law degree, she plans to use her education to further her advocacy. Akela's work stems from the historical reproductive violence that Black women faced and continue to face. Thank you so much, Akela. Our next speaker is Agbo Ikor. Agbo works with Spark Reproductive Justice Now as their policy and advocacy director, working at the intersection of reproductive justice and queer liberation. Though Agbo has found a theoretical home with reproductive justice, her intentional introduction to organizing was through feminist issues like pay equity, sex discrimination, and civic engagement. And then our third speaker is Yemi Kumbehi. Yemi is a Black feminist, queer, femme liberation strategist, abortion advocate, and reproductive justice organizer. Yemi is currently the Constellations Hive organizer at Black Feminist Future. Previously, Yemi worked as the local campaign manager for Amplify's Georgia's Collaborative. She has a background in intimate partner violence advocacy as a formal legal advocate and partnership against violence. With Partnership Against Domestic Violence. And Yemi has also worked as the bookseller for Karis Books and More, the South's oldest independently owned feminist bookstore. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Akela, who's going to kick us off. Just a little bit about the process for this evening. So we're going to have these 3 lovely speakers give us some education, deepen our knowledge of reproductive justice. And then for the final half an hour, we are going to transition into breakout sessions where we will be able to have more intimate conversations about what we learned and how we want to apply this to our work. But we'll give further instructions around that following their presentations. All right, Kayla, please take it away.
Hello, everyone. Gina, that grounding was amazing and exactly what I needed on this Friday. I am trying to share my screen, but it's saying something about too many video sources. So I don't know.
And maybe you have to be the only one. Perfect. See if that works.
Okay. It still says this. It says, please ask your host to remove a source and try again.
Interesting. Maybe one of us needs to no longer be a speaker temporarily. Feel free to boot me, Olivia, and I'll come back on later.
Here's me. Sorry, I'm always clicking the wrong buttons. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this is Reproductive Justice 101 with me, Akela from Sister Love. At Sister Love, our mission is to eradicate the adverse impact of HIV, sexual and reproductive health rights, and justice challenges impacting women and their families through education, prevention, support, research, and human rights advocacy in the United States and around the world. And jumping into a little bit of the RJ framework, which provides a completely different conceptualization of the experiences of women, girls, femmes, and gender expansive persons in their struggle for equality, social justice, and human rights. This movement offers a different place for us as Black women, women of color, gender expansive folks to be in leadership and help develop political strategies that effectively contest the intersectional oppressions that we have faced, which basically happens at the intersection of our gender, our race, our sexuality, our class. And with reproductive justice, we connect personal experiences with the political reality of the efforts to control the fertility of women of color through various legislation that dramatically affect our ability to be self-determining in our bodies and ultimately our futures, families, and communities. Reproductive justice is the human right to maintain personal bodily autonomy, the right to have children, to not have children, and parent the children we do have in safe and sustainable communities. Indigenous, Black women, and other people of color, girls, femmes, and gender expansive folks have always fought for RJ. However, the term was coined in June of 1994 by a group of 12 Black women. And the criteria for reproductive justice is as follows: is intersectional, it connects the local to the global, as we'll get into a little bit later with Yemi's presentation, bringing you back here home to Georgia. It's based on the human rights framework and makes the link between individual and community, addresses government and corporate responsibility, fights all forms of population control, commits to individual community leadership development that results in power shifts, and it puts marginalized communities at the center of that analysis. It also understands that political power, participation of those impacted, and policy changes are necessary in order for us to achieve real reproductive justice. It also has its own intersectionality in involving theory, strategy, and practice. Reproductive justice also applies to everyone. Reproductive justice is the human right to control one's body, sexuality, gender, and reproductive choices. And this right can only be achieved when all women and girls and birthing people have the complete economic, social, and political power and resources to make healthy decisions about their bodies, their families, and their communities, and everyday decisions about our lives. True reproductive justice for Black women, girls, and gender expansive people also requires an intergenerational and intersectional lens, because Roe was never enough. So reproductive justice is this intentional effort to shed light on the combined forms of oppression that threaten our bodily integrity and autonomy. And just jumping a little bit into the legal framework, because a lot of times we see reproductive justice, with pro-rights, and pro-health kind of synonymous with Roe v. Wade, Planned Parenthood v. Casey. And the mainstream framework focused largely on being pro-choice or pro-life. However, choice has never guaranteed a person access. So there are gaps in the needs of those who needed more than just the choice to choose abortion. A pro-choice and pro-life binary is an adequate. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. You're kind of a little bit in and out or low. I don't know if you can get closer to the mic and see if maybe it's a little easier to hear you.
No, you're fine. Can you hear me now?
That is better. If others if you'll start, I'll let you know if there's still those issues. Thank you.
Okay, no, I'm sorry. So yes, the pro-choice and pro-life binary is inadequate to address the complex needs and politics surrounding reproductive justice. And by adopting a human rights framework, we were able to work beyond the Constitution and beyond the courts. And it also assists us in making a global movement, connecting all of the issues that we face, from menstruation to menopause to houselessness, joblessness, and achieving equitable access. So achieving reproductive justice, I created a quick list of kind of the things that I just went over. We must analyze power systems, address intersecting oppressions, center the voices of those most marginalized, committed to destroying oppressive systems, and we must name what these oppressive systems are. White supremacy, neoliberal capitalism, fascism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, misogynoir, and the list goes on. But our oppression is gendered, sexualized, and racialized, and RJ works to better address these paradigms and eradicate these systems. Audre Lorde said there is no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives, and we will not be free until our Black and Indigenous, incarcerated, disabled, queer, trans women are free and have access to the resources and full human rights to live self-determined lives without fear of violence, discrimination, oppression, repression, or retaliation. All oppressions impact our reproductive lives. Sister Love, along with In Our Own Voice, National Black Women's Reproductive Justice, and Interfaith Voices, and a host of other Black women-led reproductive justice organizations, created this proactive policy agenda. The policy agenda offers proactive policy solutions to address the issues at the intersections of race, gender, class, sexual orientation, and gender identity within the situational impacts of economics, politics, and culture that make up the lived experiences of Black women, femmes, girls, and gender expansive individuals in the United States. And in this policy agenda, we work to craft policy solutions grounded in the human rights framework. And the language is intentional to address the specific needs of Black folks in our communities. Policies are crafted often using language that is exclusionary or without regard to the actual effect that the policy will have on the lives of people, especially given this country's history of oppressing people through legislation, language, media, and institutionalized harm. So in RJ, there's a saying that it is not enough to say that what we are against, we must state what we are for. So I just wanted to include some of these broader concepts. These are not all of what RJ entails, but does say what we are for. We're for voting access, criminal justice reform or complete abolition, abortion access, maternal health, HIV advocacy, childcare, contraception equity, STI prevention, domestic violence assistance, safe homes, safe communities, and adequate wages. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Akela. I believe now, Agbo, you are going to present.
Sorry, this mic function is just not working with me. But thank you. Let me go ahead and share my screen with the presentation. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and show you all the presentation. Thank you so much for having me. If moderator or someone, if you see presentation now, please let me know. And
I think we lost you, Agbo. There was some distortion and then it cut out now. Mm-hmm. No.
Agbo, if you hover over the image of yourself, you should see a little settings wheel where you can change the audio input if you have another one you want to use.
And if it's helpful to turn off your video, can't hear you still. But if it's bandwidth, you could turn off your video while you're sharing, but still can't hear you. Oh, let's see.
I turned off
Sorry,
my
y'all.
video.
Thank you for bearing with us.
I turned off my video.
Say a little bit more.
Can you hear me now? I turned off my video.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see if it continues.
All right. Let's see. Well, now I gotta figure out how to share my screen again. There we go. All right, please, again, let me know if you can't hear me for whatever reason or can't see my screen. I hope this works out, but thanks for y'all's patience. So yes, I am going to be doing a very just like quick queering reproductive justice. Just to introduce Spark. Spark is an organization based in Atlanta. We are a very small organization. We've been around for about 15 years, organizing at the intersection of reproductive justice and then queer and trans liberation. So with that, we center Black women and then queer and trans young folks of color. Again, we've been doing that work for about 15 years, based in Atlanta. We are a staff of 7 mighty, amazing people. And yeah, let's get into some queering RJ. So just to give a brief rundown of how Spark approaches and defines reproductive justice. We define reproductive justice as a social justice movement rooted in the belief that individuals and communities should have the resources and power to make sustainable and liberatory decisions about their bodies, genders, sexualities, and lives. It's pro-sex, sexuality, queer bodies, access to abortion and contraception, birthrights and chosen families, and so much more. So you may remember earlier how Michaela gave that amazing definition of reproductive justice, and what really stood out to me was that the notion that folks can make decisions about their genders, their sexualities, right? When it comes down to it, what we tend to center at Spark around reproductive justice is that bodily autonomy piece. So if you remember those 4 tenets of RJ, have a child, not have a child, parent the children you have in safe, sustainable environments, and then bodily autonomy. When it comes to how we queer RJ, we tend to think a lot of that bodily autonomy piece. So just a brief definition of how I'm going to be using the word queering this evening. So when we refer to, quote, queering something, we're actively challenging the heteronormative lens in which it's typically viewed. So if I had like a bit more time for like this full training, I could talk about just like the origins of the word queer, like what it means to queer something, how folks have used it in the past, and generally how we've kind of shifted into its use today. But for tonight, when I say queering, I'm really saying that we're challenging how things are viewed from a heteronormative, generally like white supremacist lens, and how we challenge that and kind of like flip it on its head. So as I said earlier, Spark operates at the intersection of reproductive justice and queer liberation. Queer liberation. So by challenging the notion that gender and sexuality are part of an essential self, so essential meaning that by virtue of a particular identity, you have some inherent characteristics, which isn't necessarily the truth. So, for example, you hear that by virtue of someone being a woman, they are inherently nurturing, they're inherently caring. And that's not necessarily the case. That's what I mean by essential or essentialism. So gender and sexuality are part of an essential self, and understanding that sex, gender, and sexuality are socially constructed, we can create a world where all people can make sustainable and liberatory decisions about our bodies, genders, sexualities, families, and lives holistically and without shame or fear of policing. So it really is just challenging those heteronormative white supremacist norms of gender and sexuality, understanding that, sex, gender, sexuality, it's all like, it's a lot more complicated than that binary that we that has been ingrained in us since birth. These are all like socially constructed identities. And by challenging that, we really make it so that folks can live their most liberatory lives. They can live the best lives they can in the communities that they want to live in. And yeah, it really is an active process of doing this in order to achieve queer liberation. So how do we queer RJ? And I'm going to talk a little bit about how Spark specifically queers RJ. So just to start, I want to talk about like why we do it. So we know the queer and trans liberation movement and reproductive justice are interwoven. They really can't be separated. In order to really like achieve the tenets of reproductive justice, again, highlighting like bodily autonomy, you really have to consider how we're building towards queer and trans liberation as well. The goals of reproductive justice, as well as all social movements, won't be reached unless we center those who are most marginalized. So it's that notion of centering the margin, centering those who in maybe more prevalent or I guess resource social movements, we don't really hear from those voices as much, but by actively and intentionally centering those voices, we make it so that everyone can benefit, everyone can reach liberation. And then just queer and trans folks need access to reproductive health care too. That really is just like the truth of it. When we're talking about reproductive justice, we do ourselves a disservice by not acknowledging the healthcare that queer and trans folks need as well, and some of the barriers that they that we run up against when it comes to just getting healthcare, whether it's like resources, money, or even just like discriminatory practices or doctors who just aren't with it. Those are active like barriers to receiving healthcare. RJ and queer liberation are inseparable. So yeah, I mean, that's really just the gist of it. Recognizing that reproductive justice and queer liberation, as I said, they really can't be separated. In order to achieve, liberation, we have to consider, reproductive justice, operate from that framework. But in order to achieve the tenets of reproductive justice, we also have to operate from this queer liberatory framework. So getting to how we tend to do it, we recognize that we must be willful and intentional about full inclusion of our communities. So that's people of color, whether they're queer, trans, cis, gender nonconforming, gender expansive, all gender identities. We must be willful and intentional about fully including them in our spaces and how we talk about our reproductive health care and how we talk about any issue. And then beyond reproductive health care, how we talk about other threats to our rights, other threats to our bodily autonomy. We all are pretty familiar that it's not going to stop at abortion, right? At the same time, they've been coming for trans rights and, gay marriage and stuff like that. It's all really interconnected. And again, think about it. It all is an attack on our bodily autonomy, our ability to choose what's right for our genders, bodies, sexualities, lives. We create space for intentional inclusivity. For example, our RJ leadership camp. So I'm just going to go back one slide. So this is a picture from, 3 years ago of our fire camp, Fierce Youth Reclaiming and Empowering Fire Camp. This is a camp we put on every summer where we invite young queer and trans folks of color from throughout the Southeast to come to Atlanta, learn about reproductive justice, while also strengthen their cultural organizing skills. So we add in sort of like a media's element, an arts element, to teach folks about how shifting culture is very important in just reaching goals within reproductive justice. So yeah, I wanted to shout out this picture. I think the theme that year was theater. Yes, it was theater. And then I saw someone who was actually part of our fire camp this year join us tonight. So I'm very, very happy to see you out there, Nandi. Shout out. Let's see. We actively approach RJ through a queer and trans liberation lens. So it's definitely a process, an intentional process where we approach reproductive justice through a queer and trans liberatory lens. And we take a twofold approach. It's necessary to work on the immediate issues that dangerously impact our communities while simultaneously doing the work of systemic cultural change. So when it comes to centering the most marginalized, by nature of them being the most marginalized, they're the ones who are least likely to be resourced, and they're the ones least likely to be able to have the resources, the funds to be able to do this work. So we strive at Spark to provide whatever opportunities, provide whatever space, resources we can in order to support our communities and kind of meet those needs to the extent that we can, right where they are, while also building up leaders so that we can do this systemic change. We also shift our language. We must understand how cis-centered language can isolate queer and trans folks from the conversation and the movement. So I think within just RJ, we've been doing a good job of sort of shifting away from, I guess, cis language, saying women, implying that the only people impacted by, abortion and things like that are women. We've shifted from using that language. Some terms that we've used in the past, people have penises, to, refer to folks, who have penises, right? It really just depends on the situation, on what language you're going to use. People have vagina, people with a uterus, or can physically carry a child or have the ability to get pregnant. And then people with the ability to create sperm. It really just depends on the context, what's more appropriate to use. People with one or the other, and people with both, right? So we're aware of this, especially in outreach, advocacy, organizing, and messaging. So I like to say it's not enough just to show up in a space and say your pronouns, and then when you leave the space, it's sort of oh yeah, but what we really mean is right. We have to really be active in challenging those heteronormative norms, those cis-normative standards, so that we are as inclusive as possible within our movement. Some of our strategies. Recognizing long-term systemic change requires building new leadership for marginalized communities and educational programs designed to shift culture. So it's not enough that we just, center those who are at the margins. We also have to actively build leaders within those identities. The only folks who know the most about what they need is the folks who are actually impacted. So we strive to strengthen their leadership. Folks who are joining on this call, great job. You are doing the work to strengthen your leadership, particularly for issues that impact you the most. Our strategies are informed by our location in the South, where progressive agendas are often under assault by conservative opposition. So just recognizing that the strategy that we used here in Georgia may be a bit different than what we see in California or New York, because we are contending with more hostile legislature than some of these more progressive states. And then we must create our own models of organizing that are distinct and different from organizations in more progressive political climates. Centering trans and gender nonconforming folks. So reiterating why it's necessary, we recognize that trans and GNC folks, and we've kind of shifted our language a bit around gender nonconforming to gender expansive folks, so trans and gender expansive folks, recognizing that they're erased in many reproductive justice spaces. Trans folks face disproportionate experiences of poor health outcomes. And then recognizing that RJ requires an intersectional approach, just like at its core, RJ is intersectional, wherein we can't ignore how interconnected systemic oppressions of race, gender, and class impacts health outcomes. Not going to get too much into this, but I think it's important to name some of like the reproductive oppressions we're talking about when, as it relates to trans folks specifically. I feel like sometimes, you know, when we come into space and we're like, yes, you know, like we have to name that trans folks are impacted. We get questions as to like how, like why is it important? I wanted to take some time to name that and provide that. I hope you can still hear me. I'm like seeing that I got a text message. Good. I'm seeing like from 15 minutes ago that I got a text message that they couldn't hear me. Okay, good. All right. So investing in trans leadership. It's important that we invest in and empower trans folks of color. We must cultivate communities, and we must strive to bridge the gap between the disparate health and wellness outcomes between cis and trans folks. So it's actively investing in just building up trans folks of color so that they can lead these movements. We also like cultivate communities. We realize that a lot of the change that we wish to see is going to come from the community level through our families that we're a part of, families that we create. It really is going to come down to these communities helping each other and then doing the work to shift policy and shift culture. And that's it. Really, that was a really just like rapid querying RJ. If you really want more in depth, please like ask me about it. Happy to talk more about it or provide a longer training. But yeah, thank you. Let's see if I can. Oops.
Thank you so much, Agbo, for that grounding. We've seen that the same people coming for abortion rights are coming for trans rights, right? Like, the very same people supporting the abortion bans are those that fought for the anti-trans youth sports bills in this last legislative session. So making those connections and seeing how we can organize collectively across these frameworks and issues is so important. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Yemi. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you for having me, y'all. Welcome. I'm here to talk about beyond just the grounding and what is RJ and how do we queer RJ? How can we use this framework to connect the dots between, you know, the abortion rights and abortion access community and all of the other amazing liberatory work that's being done? Because if we're working in silos and we can't bridge gaps between the work that we're doing, then we can't get free, right? We have to be intersectional in our approach. So my name is Yemi Kabahi, she, her pronouns. I'm currently the Constellation Hive organizer at Black Feminist Future. So let's get into it. So just like another grounding in reproductive justice and Black feminisms. So we know that reproductive justice operates underneath the human rights framework, as Akela so brilliantly stated. But we also know that reproductive justice operates under the umbrella of Black feminist ideology and was created by Black feminists. So Black feminism works toward the end of oppression of all at the end of all systems of oppression. So it's not just making sure that Black women are okay, but it's making sure that transnationally we're working towards a world where there's no oppression at all. And so the question I want to answer today is, how can we use the reproductive justice framework that's grounded in Black feminisms to grow our work, to make connections, and to avoid doing our libertary work in silos, right? So you might be joining us from a racial justice organization, or you might be involved with your community center locally. How can you inject an RJ framework and operate within an RJ framework in the spaces you're already in? And how can you invite reproductive justice into your spaces? So quick review, we learned tonight that there are 4 core tenets of the reproductive justice framework. 1 is the right to have children, 2 is the right to not have children, 3 is the right to bodily autonomy, and 4 is the right to parent children in safe and sustainable communities. So what I'm thinking we'll do is go through each of these core tenets and start making some connections to issues that you might have not traditionally thought were underneath the umbrella of RJ, right? To show how connected all of our work really is, right? So number 1, the right to have children. This can look like access to affordable fertility services. We know that oftentimes folks who undergo treatments such as in vitro fertilization do so at a really high cost, and there are families who might want to conceive that don't have access to that healthcare. Access to family planning, education, and support. So that doesn't just look like sex education that is fear-based, but also sexual education that's ongoing and showing folks that family planning and wanting to have children is a part of reproductive health and their reproductive journey and their education. Eradicating high Black maternal mortality rates and infant mortality rates. We know that particularly in Georgia, that is a huge issue. Black women and birthing people are dying at vastly disproportionate rates during childbirth than their white counterparts. And we know that that is because of systemic racism and Black people not being believed about what's happening in their own bodies and not being trusted to know what's happening in their own bodies. So we know that this falls underneath the reproductive justice framework and touches a lot of the issues that we all care about. Accessible and affordable family planning options for queer families and single parent families. So much of queering reproductive justice is really looking at the nuclear family model and questioning why that is considered normal in our society. What underlying systems of oppression are telling us that a mom, a dad, and 2.5 kids is normal, right? We want to make sure that folks who are queer, who are single parents, who are multi-generational families, feel supported, empowered, and have options to create their own families. That's all a part of the tenet of the right to have children. And then we also can see things like paid parental leave and free childcare and community support for folks with kids. These are all falling underneath that tenet. So you might be already doing work that is connected to RJ, but we want you to be more explicit about that and join forces, right? And that could be structural work, it could be interpersonal, it could be supporting the single parent down the street with a meal or childcare. That is all liberatory work that needs to be done underneath the scope of RJ. So at the bottom, if you look at my kind of IRL examples, in real life examples, you can see Black Mamas Matter Alliance is an example of fighting for the right to have children underneath an RJ framework, and 9 to 5's Fight for Parental Leave is also an example of that. So the second tenet, the right to not have children. So of course, the big topic that we think of is abortion access, but it's not just, Roe being codified and us having the legal right to abortion, like Akela said, but it's about access to on-demand, affordable abortion services without barriers and without shame or stigma, which is are barriers that we sometimes don't think of. It also looks like safe, painless, and affordable contraception options. I'm not sure if y'all have ever had an experience where you go to the doctor looking for birth control options only to be told that the best thing for you is really painful, really expensive, comes with tons of side effects, right? That's not something that we have to just be okay with. We have the right to control our fertility however we feel safest and most comfortable. So also support and care for those who choose to be childless. We know that the nuclear family tells us that model that is rooted in capitalism and white supremacy, that tells us that folks should be procreating, folks should be having children in a certain way. And there's not a whole lot of structural support for people who choose different life paths. And so that's also an unlearning and an RJ effort to make sure that those people are held in our society. And of course, my IRL example here is Amplify Georgia Collaborative's abortion access work at the state and the local level to make sure that folks who don't want to parent do not have to parent. And number 3, the right to bodily autonomy. Agbo spoke about how queering RJ is really deeply connected to this tenet. So this looks like access to gender-affirming healthcare. And that's not just for queer and trans folks, right? Like gender affirming healthcare can also look like medications for erectile dysfunction, right? Like that's gender affirming if you think about it. So cis people also need access to gender affirming healthcare, like breast reconstruction after having a mastectomy. There are all types of reasons that people need this and why it needs to be expanded. Access to education on consent. So everyone deserves to have the tools and the information to live a life free from sexual violence and intimate partner violence. And a society free from slut shaming. If y'all have ever been to like Take Back the Night walks that a lot of universities put on, or if you've ever been to a slut walk, that is getting at the core of a person has the right to display their body how they want, to use their body how they would like without fear of violence. Care, rights, and full societal participation for disabled folks is a huge piece of bodily autonomy. If you followed the Free Britney Spears movement, knowing that because someone has a physical or a mental disability does not mean that they should be subject to something like a conservatorship where they can't make any legal decisions for themselves. And we know that Britney Spears is a high profile example, but there are tons of disabled people who are under conservatorships, not able to vote, not able to get contraception and family plan in a way that makes sense for them. And so that is a part of our fight to bodily autonomy, and RJ has to be moving through a disability justice framework as well. And then there's the right to know what's in your food, your medicine, et cetera, right? To know, to have transparency from the state, from corporations about what's affecting your body. And that's something that is tied up in kind of like the environmental rights movement and corporate accountability movements. And those are all folks that you can be doing RJ work with, and they might not even know that they're doing something that is reproductive justice oriented. So some additional resources, looking to Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence, if you're interested in Georgia-based DV resources and bringing a reproductive justice lens to that. And then there's, of course, the ongoing fight to close the Atlanta jail. If you are in Atlanta, activists and advocates in the reproductive justice movement and beyond have been working tirelessly to try to get that jail closed. And that fight continues because when you are incarcerated by the state, you don't have access to full bodily autonomy. We know that. And then we've got our last tenet, which is really expansive and probably my favorite tenet because it really expands beyond, some more basic issues, what reproductive justice really is. So the right to parent in a safe and stable community. This looks like quality, culturally competent, free public education, right? My community is not safe or sustainable if my child goes to school and doesn't learn from people who look like them and doesn't learn about their cultural history in an equitable way, right? So we can't ban critical race theory in schools and have safe and sustainable communities. Those two things are the antithesis of each other. Communities that are free from state and interpersonal violence. So, for example, if I have a child and I fear that that child will be killed by the police or will be incarcerated unjustly or will spend a lot of their life in prison, that is not me having the right to parent in a safe and sustainable community, right? That's not reproductive justice being realized. It also is about communities being free from pollution and other effects caused by climate change. So if you've ever done climate preservation work, if you've ever done climate change work, you are doing reproductive justice work because at the end of the day, we care about the planet, not just because we have to live on it, but because we hope that generations that come after us also are able to live in a clean and safe world. It also looks like social safety nets for all, not just for pregnant people or for children. It also looks like affordable housing. I will plug that Atlanta is going through an affordable housing crisis, like many cities are right now. And that will probably only get worse unless we join forces to recognize that this is a reproductive justice issue, and that issue is connected to our fight for abortion access, right? We can't ask folks to not only have no access to abortion, but then to be forced into parenthood in a place that doesn't even allow them to have a roof over their head, right? These are issues that are all interconnected. And then the right to parent in a safe and stable community also looks like having thriving community centers, parks, libraries, and other public goods. If you've ever been to your local library and realized they don't actually have any books about things that you're interested in or that reflect your personal politics or your culture or your identity, that is not a safe and sustainable community, right? So it can be that kind of simple. But we know that reproductive justice and that framework can kind of uncover what are the reasons behind that. And so I'll also say that if you've been following in Atlanta, the Stop Cop City movement, please do. This is a reproductive justice issue dealing directly with the deforestation that's being threatened by the city of Atlanta. They're trying to build a police academy in a place that has a really great tree cover and is, a really huge place of biodiversity in our city. And it's also in a Black community where folks are already suffering from, lack of affordable housing, and to put a place that is, belongs to the police in that community would be really hostile and not fair. So I definitely encourage you to get into that movement as well and bring that RJ analysis to it too. And so I'm going to talk about making connections. So there are different ways to make these connections, right? So we've talked a little bit about the structural. So that looks like targeting bad laws, advocating for better laws, building community power to bring down oppressive systems. And that's kind of like the larger way that you would make connections between movements, right? So realizing that, Roe v. Wade falling also opens the door for same-sex marriage to not be protected anymore. Like, those are structural issues that you can make connections between. But there's also, which is less talked about, the interpersonal, which looks like educating others, building relationships, participating in mutual aid, holding community members accountable for potential harm that's been done, and communal political education. So, the conversations that you have with people in your community are just as important sometimes, right, when building power. So if you have a family member who says, who doesn't use gender inclusive language when talking about abortion, that might be an opportunity for you to draw connections between trans liberation and reproductive justice and bridge that gap interpersonally as a way to build power and bring them into the reproductive justice fold. And then there's also the matter of combating internalized oppression, right? So this looks like political education, reading, self-reflection, living out your politics. The personal is political, right? I think a lot of people are probably on this call right now because they are trying to do some internal work to find where they fit in this movement. And so that's also really important, because then that allows you to build power with other people and then eventually get up to the point where you're fighting structural systems together with other folks. So these are all reasons and levels at which it's really important to make these connections and to not just do work siloed, and labeled just about abortion or just about another issue, right? These all have to be really intimately connected. So we're stronger together. I think that if we realize that a lot of us are doing liberatory work that affects each other, we are better off and are able to achieve our goals more quickly. So 2 questions I would love for y'all to consider before I close is, number 1, what work already being done in your community can be supported by an RJ analysis? We talked about, potentially the Stop Cop City efforts if you're in Atlanta. What about folks who are, working with houseless people in your community? Do they understand that houseless people menstruate and need menstrual products? That is an issue of RJ, and bringing an RJ analysis to the work that's already being done. And so the second question is, how can you expand your RJ analysis to include other issue areas, right? So if you're coming to this summit with kind of a solid foundation of reproductive justice, you're already doing abortion access work, that's amazing. But how can you expand that work to include folks who are working on campaigns to eradicate poverty, right? We know that poverty and access to abortion are deeply connected, right? And abortion bans are a way to perpetuate poverty. And so how can we link arms with the folks who are working on that and make sure that we are identifying similar targets and educating each other on our issue areas? So definitely encourage y'all to think about what community impact you can have and how you can broaden your understanding of RJ. And I think that's it from me. I'm really excited to get in these breakout groups and talk to y'all.
Yemi, thank you so much. And as I just said in the chat, these are really great reflection questions. It is going to really match what we are moving into breakouts for. I'm going to take like 2 seconds, a little more than 2 seconds, to explain how we're moving into breakouts. So bear with me. You can see at the top left of your screen. Okay, the short answer of why we're doing this is that it's not like Zoom. You can't just break everyone out within the same frame that we're in. So you are going to go to the top left of your screen where it says schedule in those little all caps letters. And you should be able to see drop down about 5 different breakouts. They are called RJ in this moment breakout 1, January to March, RJ in this moment breakout 2, April to May, and so on. We figured a good way to randomize and approximately evenly split us up into groups would be to choose the month of your birthday and go to that room. So you're going to scoot into there. And if you can be patient for like 1 or 2 minutes, in fact, I would suggest we just plan on coming to the room with conversation starting at 7:55 so that everybody has time to scoot into the rooms and the moderators have time to set up your speakers. So in each room, you're going to be joined by either one of the presenters that you just heard from or Allison or myself. And we will be facilitating conversation with some of those questions that Yemi brought up, some of the ones that you no doubt already have in your mind after watching this, and some questions that our facilitators have. Before we go, here's how you can participate. As you can see, it's a format here where not everybody is on screen at the same time talking on the mic. So there's 2 ways if you want to, for example, answer a question or be part of a 5 to 7 minutes of taking a turn to be in a conversation back and forth. You have 2 options. One is that you can answer the reflection questions or share your thoughts or respond to each other and the facilitator in the chat, as you all have been doing. The other option is if you want to come on camera and on your mic to speak, then you type "on stage, please" in the chat, and your tech moderator will find you, and you'll get a little pop-up window that says like you're invited to come on stage. So you accept the invitation to join the stage, and then you have, just to keep everybody able to be part of speaking, we can have, I think, up to 4 of you speaking together with the trainer, the presenter at the same time. So that's how we will manage to have people who like to speak and people who like to write, both in the conversation. All of these ways are equally valid. And finally, you got that ask a question button at the bottom of your screen. And that is also a way that you can send your questions to the presenter. So go ahead and do that drop-down box where it says schedule, and get ready to go into your breakout rooms based on your birthday. And then at 8:30, we're all going to close straight out of the breakout sessions. We're not coming back to plenary, and we see you again at 10 in the morning. So I'm excited to have a bit of a more informal back and forth with everybody in my breakout room, and see you there. Just be back on screen, or back with the screen on and your water and your bio break taken care of at 7:55. And all right, let's go.